Hey, clean my car, will ya? It'd be embarrassing to show the relatives a dirty car, right?
The whole thing started with such words from my husband. The day before the memorial service at my in-laws, I was ordered to clean the car. If he thought it was embarrassing, he should have done it himself since he was off work. I sighed in dismay, as he always pushes the troublesome tasks onto me while he takes it easy. Reluctantly starting to clean the car's interior, I stumbled upon something unbelievable. A woman's earrings and filled out divorce papers and marriage application form. Of course, none of them were mine. The name written on the marriage document was unknown to me. It was his mistress's name. My husband was having an affair. My head went blank for a moment, but then I smirked at the corner of my mouth. How kind of him to leave such essential information. A chuckle escaped, echoing inside the car. It was interrupted by the vibration of the smartphone in my pocket. The screen showed a message from Tom's mother, Susan. I placed the documents on the seat, and instead of replying, I called her directly. My name is Michelle, 33 years old. I'm a working housewife living with my husband, Tom, who is a year older than me and whom I married 4 years ago. His family runs a general store, and I usually help out while working part-time at a nearby supermarket. Tom doesn't work at the store but is in sales at a major corporation.
A general store, huh? I bet it doesn't make much money. I don't feel like taking over a shop like that.
He says such things, showing his dislike for the store. I don't work at the general store every day, but I like it there, and it bothers me whenever he belittles it.
Thanks for always helping out, Michelle.
You're really a lifesaver.
Every time I go to help, my in-laws always express their gratitude warmly. I liked both their personalities and the warm atmosphere of the store. It wasn't just his belittling of the store. There were other things about Tom I wished he would change. We moved to a suburban house when our daughter Emily was born, but he uses his job as an excuse and hardly participates in household chores and childcare. And I work too. Sorry, Tom, I can't step away right now. Can you go shopping for me? When I was busy with Emily and asked him on his day off, he would always make a face as if he didn't want to. He would be lying on the sofa, messing with his smartphone, seemingly free.
What? Of course not. I'm tired from work. Let me rest on my day off.
Then, can you watch her while I go out? He nodded reluctantly, so I left Emily with him and went shopping. Our house is in a location with poor public transport, so having a car is essential. Thus, I own a compact car, while Tom has a larger family car. However, it's rare for the three of us to go out in the car together. Tom doesn't like going out with us, and most of the time, it ends up being just Emily and me. Even if I ask him to help a bit more with the household and child care, he brushes it off. One day, after repeating such things, I got a message from Susan. It was about soon holding the memorial service for my husband's grandfather. I generally made it a point to attend gatherings at my in-laws. I wanted to show my face as much as possible for my in-laws, who I owe much to, and it wasn't hard because many of the relatives are kind. While we were heading to my in-laws' house in Tom's car to discuss this, I felt a slight discomfort. Something inside the car seemed a bit off. The passenger seat was slightly shifted, and the smell was somewhat different. These were trivial things, but oddly nagging. Feeling uneasy, I casually asked, Why does the inside of the car look different from usual? Did you give someone a ride or something?
Yeah, I gave a colleague a lift. We had to go to the same place during work.
Tom replied in a tone as if making small talk. I remembered him complaining about using his car for work, as he also uses it for commuting and sometimes has to go to sales visits with it.
Why do I have to use my own car? Wish they'd let me use a company car.
I see, that's what it was, and I was relieved. He didn't seem to be in any particular hurry, and I exhale, relieved that I was mistaken. A little later, Tom's overtime started to increase gradually. He used to come home by 7 p.m., as his regular off was at 6, but it became more common for him to return after 9, sometimes even past 10 or 11. Maybe because of the fatigue, his face looked sullen when he came home, almost as if he was radiating a "don't talk to me" vibe. Worried that I might provoke him by speaking carelessly, our conversations as a couple dwindled. Naturally, Emily was asleep by that time, and the already limited interaction with her vanished.
If you're going to neglect the household, you might as well quit your job and help out.
He said it out of the blue. Despite having continuously worked part-time and helped at my in-laws, this was the first time he had spoken to me so harshly. Maybe he had become easily explosive over trivial matters. Even so, I felt angry, thinking he was being too harsh. I had not neglected the household chores. I argued that I had been doing the cleaning and laundry as usual and had prepared proper meals.
And what exactly is done properly? The clothes aren't folded right, and there are books not put back on the shelf. How can you say everything is perfect?
He nitpicked and complained. I hadn't changed the way I did household chores. Moreover, it was usually he who left things out and didn't tidy up. Frustration with him was growing inside me. Perhaps sensing the increasing tension between us, Emily seemed to cry more frequently than before. I tried to be mindful to improve things, but I would get irritated, unable to endure Tom's constant nagging and snide remarks. Around this time, I began to receive certain suggestions from my in-laws about the general store and Tom. A few weeks later, on the morning before the day of the memorial service.
Hey, clean my car, will ya? It'd be embarrassing to show the relatives a dirty car, right?
I had been ordered by him to do so. If he thought it was embarrassing, he should have done it himself since he was off work. I sighed in dismay, as he always pushes the troublesome tasks onto me while he takes it easy. Reluctantly, I started cleaning the interior of the car. Checking under the passenger seat for any trash, I noticed something. Reaching out, I picked up a hairpin and several pieces of paper. The hairpin was immediately recognizable as mine. Probably dropped and slid under the seat while I was sitting there. But what about these papers? They were receipts, all unfamiliar to me. Printed on them were a gas station logo, date and time of visit, and purchased items. Definitely not mine. The reason being, the store name listed was one I usually don't visit. It might be around the area where Tom goes for work. Slightly puzzled, I decided to continue cleaning. This time I looked under the driver's seat, and again something had fallen out. I picked it up and found it to be a pair of sparkling earrings. I don't usually wear jewelry. I thought that a pair of earrings shaking in my arms would attract Emily's interest, and she would pull them away. Besides, I could not rule out the possibility that Emily might accidentally ingest the earrings if she dropped them somewhere in the house. That is why I did not have many accessories in the first place. Even if I did, it would only be in a drawer where Emily could not reach it. So who owns the things in my hands now? I remembered that I had felt something strange in the car before. Thinking about it, I think the smell at that time was a woman's perfume. It's not like I would lose something as obvious as earrings in the car. In other words, she may have left the scent or dropped the earring on purpose to make me notice her. Is this a declaration of war? I opened the storage compartment on the dashboard, feeling that if I looked for something else I would find it. I opened the dashboard compartment, expecting to find something else. To my surprise, I found a completed divorce and marriage certificate in there. Tom's name was in the husband column of the marriage certificate. And in the wife column, the name of a woman I did not know was written. My mind went blank for a moment. I had been thinking that it was suspicious when his overtime work began to increase rapidly. But this was a woman's shadow, no matter what I thought. I could already say that this was evidence of an affair. Even though I had a thinly veiled suspicion, I was puzzled when I finally saw something like this. But it was only for a moment. I twisted the edges of my lips into a grin. How kind of them to go out of their way to tell me their names and other necessary information. And I can't help but laugh at Tom's dumbness. I don't know if he didn't even consider the possibility that I might open the storage, but why did he do it in such a way as to give me the evidence? A giggle leaks out and echoes through the car. It is interrupted by the vibrating sound of the smartphone in my pocket. Displayed on the screen was a message from Susan. I placed the file on the seat, and instead of replying, I called her directly.
Michelle, what's wrong? Is there something you want to check?
Yes, it's not about the memorial service. It's about Tom. At my serious tone, I heard Susan gasp. Telling the kind-hearted Susan about her son's affair might hurt her, but it was something that needed to be said. I told her about finding the divorce and marriage documents in the car.
Michelle, can you come here in Tom's car right away?
After a few seconds of silence, Susan murmured in a resolute tone. Tom had fallen asleep after ordering me to clean the car, so now was my chance. I went back inside, got Emily ready, and left the house. Upon arriving at my in-laws, my husband's parents greeted me with smiles. But their expressions were slightly strained, seemingly hiding their shock about their son's affair. As I was ushered into the living room, I laid out the evidence I found in the car on the table. Receipts, hearings, and the divorce and marriage documents. As the table filled up, their eyes widened more and more.
Have you checked the dash cam? Maybe there's something recorded on it.
Encouraged by my father-in-law, James, I decided to go back to the car to check. The recorder was designed to capture not only the front view during driving, but also the interior of the car. Pressing the play button, hoping to see the face of the mistress, my heart was pounding fast. I had mixed feelings of wanting and not wanting to check. However, regardless of what was on my mind, the images began to flow. Not only the image of his lover, but also the scene of the act in progress was recorded on the screen. My in-laws were completely appalled, looking away from the screen or closing their eyes tightly in disgust.
So it is true.
James muttered. I immediately stopped the video, as playing it all the time seemed to make me sick too.
I'm really sorry for what our son has done.
You should divorce him. He's no good.
Despite being entirely blameless, my in-laws bowed deeply, apologizing. They had suspected something off about Tom all along. In fact, the two of us were thinking of closing the restaurant around the time we got married. This was because sales were sluggish. However, sales began to grow after I started helping out. When I learned that Susan enjoyed making accessories as a hobby, I set up a website for the store and introduced it to the public, which became very popular, and the store's sales began to increase little by little. 4 years later, things were going well, and my parents-in-law decided to leave me in charge of the store and go behind the scenes. They discussed this with Tom when he came home late. The in-laws had been conducting various investigations for the procedure and learned of Tom's infidelity. The recorder alone would have been enough evidence, but we were able to gather various other items as well.
Now I could get a divorce on his behalf. Feel free to demand alimony from him.
I decided to divorce on the spot. And since I also had the divorce papers just in time, I finished filling out my part of the form and went to submit it. Of course, the fact that Tom and his adulterer had also filled out the marriage certificate means that they had originally intended to divorce me and be together right away. After completing the filing, I also contacted my own parents and explained the situation.
Michelle, are you okay?
I couldn't allow them to hurt our precious daughter.
They were both concerned and furious with Tom for having an affair. They also told me to take Emily and come back to my parents' house. The next day, I received a phone call from Tom. I could easily imagine that it was probably an angry call from him for not attending a memorial service at his parents-in-law's house on that day.
Hey, where are you? Why didn't you attend the memorial service?
As expected, Tom yells at me as soon as the call is initiated. It was so loud that I even heard a crackling sound. But I was not intimidated by it and answered in a matter-of-fact manner. Why? Because I'm no longer your family, so I don't need to be there, right? Plus, James and Susan should know about this.
Huh? What are you talking about? Don't joke around.
It made no sense. At that moment, he raised his voice again.
You're the one joking.
James must have been nearby and heard the conversation, as his scolding voice came through the phone. Susan seemed to be there too, as her voice could also be heard.
Do you even understand how much you've been tormenting Michelle?
For her sake, you should divorce quickly and set her free.
At the mention of torment, realizing his affair was exposed, his previously bold voice changed to one of panic.
Hey, sorry, I don't want a divorce. Please.
Though it wasn't a video call and I couldn't see his face, I heard the sound of him sniffling, possibly crying. But it was meaningless to act like this now. The divorce papers have already been filed. Besides, he was already married to another woman.
What do you mean by divorce papers? And another woman?
He sounded puzzled by what I was saying. Since everything was out in the open, there was no use in him trying to deceive anymore. Tom fell silent as if deep in thought, and I told him there was nothing more to discuss and hung up the phone. A month later, Tom visited me, seeming furious. His emotions were all over the place, irritated, then crying in panic, and suddenly angry again, making me think distantly how intense his mood swings were. Well, we're divorced, so technically he's a stranger now.
You filing those papers on your own has caused me a lot of trouble. Take responsibility.
Hearing this, I almost laughed but managed to keep a composed face. In fact, when I checked the dash cam, I saw Tom and his mistress, Marissa, joking around and filling out the divorce and marriage documents.
So, make sure you dispose of these properly.
Sure, I got it. Marissa had pretended to throw away the marriage document, but when Tom was not around, she secretly stashed it in the dashboard. From the investigation into Tom's conduct, it turned out Marissa was a coworker, already divorced, and wanting to remarry him, so she deliberately left the papers to provoke me. It was just your mistress's provocation, I said in a cold voice, and he bit his lip, looking frustrated. He probably hadn't planned on staying with Marissa in the long run. His instruction to dispose of the marriage application form conveyed that much. Oh, and about the house mortgage. He looked puzzled, wondering how we had gone from discussing the affair to the house. All this time, I've been covering the mortgage with my salary. But now that I no longer live there, I don't have to pay, right? My income included a part-time work at the supermarket, but the general store made more money. Even though it was a suburban house, the amount was substantial. Tom looked dissatisfied, realizing I had been covering most of it.
What do you mean? That store can't be making that much money.
He still seemed to look down on the store. Snorting and narrowing his eyes, he glared at me. He might think I was bluffing, but unfortunately for him, this was the truth. I pulled out my bank book, opened it, and thrust it in front of him. He blinked repeatedly, scanning the same spot over and over. He rubbed his eyes vigorously, then squinted, taking his time to thoroughly check each figure. He seemed to find it unbelievable that I had earned that much money. His head dropped in dismay, but then he quickly looked up and approached me aggressively.
Right, my parents run that store, right? So it makes more sense for me, their blood son, to take it over, not some outsider like you.
Faced with his sudden nonsensical claim, I narrowed my eyes at him. What is he trying to say now? After all this time belittling the store and saying he wouldn't take it over, he must have been blinded by the prospect of money. However, I've already taken over the rights, so he can't inherit it. I've already inherited the rights, so I won't hand them over to you. I said this while thrusting the store-related documents at him. They were clearly signed by me and my in-laws.
So, then?
He looked down and then up to the sky, moving his head frantically as if searching for words. Then, as if he had found what he wanted to say, he looked straight at me and spoke.
Let's remarry.
What? I had absolutely no intention of getting back with someone who had an affair. It was clear that he had no lingering feelings for me. He was just after the money. Absolutely not. Besides, you're already married to another woman, right? With that, I sent him away. Remembering that I had filed the marriage application form, he knelt on the ground as if in despair and groaned. Thanks to the evidence from the infidelity investigation and the dash cam provided by my in-laws, I was able to proceed advantageously and received a significant amount of alimony. Of course, I also claimed child support for Emily. At this point, he had incurred debts, but to make matters worse, Marissa's former husband, Ken, also demanded compensation from him. The reason Marissa was divorced in the first place was that her affair with Tom had been exposed long ago. Marissa and Tom were initially just colleagues. As they talked more about work, Marissa became interested in him. She was the first to get serious, wanting to be with Tom and deliberately acting in a way that would expose their affair. However, unlike my case, She did not leave any physical evidence, so the other party was not identified. I handed the evidence I collected to Ken, enabling him to claim alimony. Tom was forced into a debt-ridden life. Although he had a salary from a major corporation, it wasn't enough to cover everything. He had to repay the debt little by little while working, unable to spend on clothing or hobbies. Marissa was also claimed for compensation by me and Ken, plunging her into despair. Without money, the two of them lived in a cheap apartment, constantly fighting.
It's your fault we got caught. Why did you deliberately leave evidences?
Unable to rebut, Marissa would just sulk and lash out at things. Their shouting could be heard through the thin apartment walls, and they lived under the scornful gaze of other residents. Meanwhile, I was living a busy but fulfilling life, actively managing a general store. James helped with business consulting, and Susan dedicated herself to crafting. Susan recently started a craft workshop in a corner of the general store, which has been very successful. I am sure the store will continue to grow. With this thought, I smiled as I imagined a happy future.